I'm Daniel Matthews, 34, a devoted father and husband who thought I had the perfect family. For 8 years I trusted completely, until the day I held what I believed was our third child and noticed he looked nothing like me or our other 2 kids. The DNA test confirmed my worst nightmare. My wife Sarah had been having an affair with her boss, and this baby wasn't mine. But what broke me wasn't just the betrayal. It was watching her lie to my face while I changed another man's child's diaper. That's when I realized the depth of her deception ran deeper than I ever imagined, and I had to make the hardest decision of my life to protect the children, who actually were mine. If you've ever felt the crushing weight of betrayal from someone you trusted most, this story is for you. The hospital bracelet still sat on our kitchen counter 3 weeks later, a tiny plastic reminder of the moment my world tilted off its axis. Baby Michael, that's what Sarah had named him, slept peacefully in his bassinet while I stared at our family photo collage on the living room wall. Emma had my dark hair and Sarah's green eyes. Jake possessed my stubborn chin and Sarah's delicate nose. Every picture told the story of our genetic legacy, our shared features woven together like a tapestry of belonging. But Michael had sandy blonde hair, neither Sarah's auburn nor my black. His eyes were a startling blue-gray, nothing like the brown and green that dominated our family tree. His face shaped the set of his ears. Even the way he cried, everything about him felt foreign in our carefully curated family portrait. "You're being ridiculous," I told myself for the 100th time, bouncing him gently as Sarah showered upstairs. Babies change. Genetics are complicated, but the rational part of my brain couldn't silence the growing whisper of doubt that started the moment the nurse placed him in my arms. Sarah had been working late more frequently over the past 2 years. Marketing campaigns, she'd explained. Client dinners that ran until midnight. Weekend strategy sessions that kept her away from family time. I'd been supportive, proud even, of her dedication to advancing her career at Peterson and Associates. Her boss, Marcus, had been promoting her rapidly, recognizing her talent and drive. Marcus. I found myself thinking about him more than I cared to admit. Tall, athletic, with those same sandy blonde locks and blue-gray eyes that seemed so familiar now. He'd been at the hospital when Michael was born, bringing flowers from the whole team. His hand had lingered on Sarah's shoulder just a moment too long, his smile a bit too warm when he looked down at the baby. "He's beautiful," Marcus had said, his voice carrying an odd note I couldn't identify at the time. Absolutely beautiful. Sarah had beamed up at him with an expression I hadn't seen directed at me in months. There was something intimate in that exchange. Something that made my stomach clench with an emotion I wasn't ready to name. Now, holding Michael while studying our family photos, that moment replayed in my mind with devastating clarity. The way Marcus's face had softened when he looked at the baby. The proprietary way he'd touched Sarah's face, supposedly brushing away a tear of joy. The fact that he'd known Sarah was in labor before I'd even called him. "Daniel?" Sarah's voice drifted down from upstairs. "Can you bring Michael up? It's time for his feeding." I looked down at the sleeping infant in my arms. In sleep, the differences seemed even more pronounced. Where Emma and Jake had been carbon copies of Sarah and me, Michael remained beautifully, heartbreakingly foreign. "Coming," I called back, my voice catching slightly on the word. As I climbed the stairs, Michael stirred, opening those blue-gray eyes that seemed to look right through me. In that moment, I felt like a stranger in my own home, holding a child who might belong to someone else entirely. The family photos watched from the walls as I passed, silent witnesses to 8 years of what I'd believed was unshakable trust. But trust, I was learning, could be more fragile than I'd ever imagined. The DNA test kit arrived in a plain brown envelope on a Tuesday morning, while Sarah was at her 6-week postpartum checkup. I'd ordered it 3 days earlier during my lunch break, sitting in my car in the office parking lot, hands shaking as I typed in my credit card information. The website promised discreet packaging and accurate results within 5 business days. Now holding the innocent-looking envelope, I felt like I was crossing a line I could never uncross. Inside were 2 cotton swabs, a collection tube, and instructions that seemed both impossibly simple and monumentally complex. Swab the inside of your cheek. Swab the baby's cheek. Mail it back. Wait for the truth that could destroy everything. I hid the kit in my toolbox in the garage beneath my socket wrench set where Sarah never looked. For 3 days it sat there like a ticking bomb while I went through the motions of normal life. Changing Michael's diapers, reading bedtime stories to Emma and Jake, kissing Sarah goodnight while my mind raced with doubts and possibilities. The opportunity came Friday evening. Sarah had taken Emma to her dance recital rehearsal, and Jake was spending the night at his friend Tommy's house. Michael was napping in his crib, and I was alone with my suspicions and a DNA test kit. My hands trembled as I opened the package. The cotton swab felt impossibly large as I rubbed it against the inside of my cheek, following the instructions with scientific precision. The second swab felt like a betrayal as I approached Michael's crib. He was sleeping on his back, one tiny fist curled near his face, breathing softly through slightly parted lips. In the afternoon light streaming through his nursery window, he looked peaceful and innocent. Beautiful, even. For a moment, I almost put the swab away. What kind of father suspects his own child? What kind of husband secretly tests paternity without discussion? But then I remembered Marcus's face at the hospital, Sarah's defensive reaction when I'd mentioned Michael's coloring, the late nights, the business trips, the way she'd started keeping her phone face down on the nightstand. The swab touched Michael's cheek gently. He didn't wake, just shifted slightly as I carefully collected the sample. Within minutes, both swabs were sealed in their respective tubes, labeled with identification numbers that would either confirm my worst fears or put my doubts to rest forever. I mailed the package that same evening, dropping it in the postal box outside our neighborhood grocery store. The return receipt promised results within 5 business days. 5 days to continue pretending everything was normal, while my marriage potentially hung in the balance. Over the weekend, I found myself studying Sarah more carefully than I had in months. She seemed different somehow, more distant, distracted. She spent long periods staring at her phone, occasionally typing messages that made her smile in ways I didn't recognize. When I asked who she was texting, she'd always have a ready answer. Her sister, her college roommate, someone from work. Sunday evening, we attended the Peterson and Associates family barbecue at Marcus's sprawling suburban home. It was supposed to be a celebration of the company's quarterly success, a chance for employees to relax with their families. Sarah had insisted we go, despite Michael being only a month old. Marcus greeted us at the front door, his smile genuine and warm. Daniel, Sarah, and this must be little Michael. His eyes lingered on the baby with an expression I couldn't quite read. He's grown so much already. I watched as Marcus interacted with my family throughout the evening. He was charming with Emma, engaging Jake in conversation about soccer and attentive to Sarah in ways that might have seemed merely professional, if not for my growing suspicions. When Michael fussed during dinner, Marcus was quick to offer help, suggesting we use his home office for privacy while Sarah nursed. You're a natural with kids, I observed, watching him bounce Michael gently while Sarah gathered her things. I've always wanted children of my own, he replied, his gaze fixed on Michael's face. Someday, hopefully soon. The way he held possibly my son felt practiced, comfortable, like he'd done it before, like Michael recognized him. That night, lying in bed next to Sarah, I stared at the ceiling and counted hours until the test results would arrive. Somewhere in a laboratory, technicians were analyzing DNA samples that would either restore my faith in my marriage or confirm that the woman sleeping beside me had shattered our family beyond repair. The waiting had begun, and with it, the slow dissolution of everything I thought I knew about my life. The email arrived on a Wednesday at 2:47 p.m. while I was sitting in a client meeting, discussing quarterly projections and market strategies. My phone buzzed against the conference table, and I glanced down to see the sender, Gene Tech Laboratories. My stomach dropped like a stone into cold water. Excuse me, I managed, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. I need to take this call. I stepped into the hallway, hands shaking as I opened the email. The subject line read, Paternity Test Results, Case Number GT 2024-87455. Below that, clinical language that would either restore my world or destroy it completely, based on DNA analysis performed on samples submitted. The probability of paternity between the tested male and child is 0.0%. This result indicates that the tested male is excluded as the biological father of the tested child with 99.99% certainty. The words blurred as I read them again. 0%. Not my child. Not my blood. Not my son. I must have made a sound, a gasp, maybe a sob, because my colleague Janet appeared in the hallway. Daniel, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I cleared my throat, forcing my professional mask back into place. Family emergency. I need to go home. The drive felt like I was moving through thick fog. Stop signs, traffic lights, familiar streets, everything looked the same, but the world had fundamentally shifted. The child I'd been loving, feeding, changing, caring for wasn't mine. The wife I'd trusted with my heart and my future had been living a lie for months. I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes, staring at the DNA results on my phone screen. The technical language couldn't soften the brutal reality. Sarah had been cheating on me. She'd gotten pregnant by another man, and she'd been planning to let me raise his child as my own for the rest of my life. When I finally walked through our front door, Sarah was in the kitchen, Michael sleeping in his bouncer while she prepared dinner. She looked up with a smile that now seemed like a mask. "You're home early. How was your day?" How was my day? I'd just learned that my 8-year marriage was built on deception, that the woman humming softly while chopping vegetables had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, that I'd been changing diapers and taking midnight feedings for a child who belonged to another man. "Sarah," my voice came out flat, emotionless. "We need to talk." She must have heard something in my tone because her knife stopped moving. "What about? Is everything okay?" I pulled out my phone, held up the email. I had a paternity test done. The color drained from her face like water from a broken glass. The knife clattered to the cutting board. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Michael continued sleeping peacefully, unaware that his world was about to fracture. "Daniel," she started, but I held up my hand. 0% probability, I said, reading from the screen. "That means Michael isn't my son. That means you've been lying to me for months. That means you've been sleeping with someone else and trying to pass off his child as mine." Sarah's legs seemed to give out. She gripped the counter for support, tears streaming down her face. "I can explain to can you?" The anger was building now, hot and raw in my chest. "Can you explain how you looked me in the eye every day while carrying another man's baby? How you let me fall in love with a child who isn't mine? How you were planning to lie to me forever?" "It wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. "It was never supposed to happen." Those words, the admission I'd been dreading and expecting, hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't supposed to happen. But it did happen. She'd made choices day after day, lie after lie, that led us to this moment. Who is he? I already knew, but I needed to hear her say it. "Daniel, please, who is Michael's father, Sarah?" She closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Marcus." The name hung in the air between us like poison. Marcus, who'd been to our home for dinner. Marcus, who'd held Emma on his shoulders at the company picnic. Marcus, who'd stood in our hospital room with flowers while I held his son and believed he was mine. "How long?" I asked. 2 years, she whispered. "It started 2 years ago. 2 years. 730 days of deception. Of coming home to his child every night. Of making love to my wife while she carried another man's baby. Of planning a future that was built on lies so fundamental that I questioned everything I thought I knew about the woman I'd married." I looked at Michael, still sleeping innocently in his bouncer. He was beautiful. There was no denying that. But he wasn't mine. Those blue-gray eyes that had seemed so foreign. That sandy blonde hair that matched no one in our family tree. Now it all made perfect, devastating sense. "I love you," Sarah said desperately. "I love our family. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Our family? Sarah, half of our family isn't actually ours. You've been living a double life for 2 years. You were going to let me raise another man's child and never tell me the truth. I wanted to tell you, when? When Michael turned 18 and looked nothing like me? When someone else figured out what I just figured out? When were you planning to stop lying to the man you supposedly love?" She had no answer for that. None that would matter now anyway. The DNA test results were clear, clinical, and final. The trust that had taken 8 years to build had been destroyed in 90 seconds of reading scientific data. As I stood in my kitchen, looking at my wife and a child I'd loved but who would never truly be mine, I realized that this moment would divide my life into before and after. Before I knew, after I knew, and there would be no going back to the before. The truth, once revealed, had changed everything. That night, I sat alone in my home office with Sarah's work calendar spread across my desk like evidence in a crime scene. She'd gone to bed early, claiming exhaustion, while I dove into the methodical work of understanding exactly how deeply I'd been deceived. Sarah's calendar told a story I'd been too trusting to read before. The client dinners that ran until midnight, the weekend strategy sessions that kept her away from family time, the business trips to conferences that seemed unusually frequent for someone in her position. Each entry now looked different through the lens of betrayal. March 2022, late meeting with M. Peterson campaign. That was 3 months after Emma's birthday party, when Marcus had complimented Sarah's presentation skills and suggested they work more closely together. I remembered being proud of her advancement, encouraging her to take on more responsibility. April 2022, overnight strategy session, Chicago. Sarah had called me from her hotel room that night, told me she missed me, asked about the kids' bedtime routine. while she was presumably conceiving another man's child. The timeline was sickeningly clear now. 2 years ago, Sarah had started staying late at work. 2 years ago, she'd become more distant physically, claiming stress and exhaustion. 2 years ago, our intimate life had begun to change in ways I'd attributed to the natural evolution of a long marriage. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our text exchanges from that period. Sarah's responses had become shorter, less engaged. Our usual playful banter had evolved into logistics about childcare and household responsibilities. When had I stopped noticing? When had I become so comfortable in our routine that I missed the signs of her growing detachment? The business trips were the worst part. Conference in Denver, client meetings in San Francisco, training seminars in Atlanta, a paper trail of opportunities for deception. I called the hotels listed on her expense reports, asking innocent questions about their conference facilities. 3 of them had no record of the business events Sarah claimed to attend. My hands shook as I realized the scope of the planning involved. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a single mistake. This was a calculated, sustained deception that had required Sarah to lie to me every single day for 24 months. Every "I love you," every family dinner, every intimate moment, all of it tainted by the knowledge that she was living a double life. The financial implications hit me next. I'd been supporting a lifestyle that included her affair. The dinners I thought were business expenses, the overnight trips, the new clothes she'd needed for client presentations. I'd been unknowingly funding my own betrayal. Worse, I'd been enthusiastically supportive. Proud of her career advancement and increased responsibilities, I found her performance reviews from Peterson and Associates, documenting Marcus's praise for her dedication to going above and beyond, and her exceptional commitment to client relationships. The language felt obscene now. Professional euphemisms for an affair that had been conducted under the guise of career development. But the cruelest discovery was hidden in her pregnancy timeline. Sarah had gotten pregnant with Michael 10 months ago. I could pinpoint the exact period because we'd been trying to conceive for months, and I'd been tracking her cycle with the dedication of a devoted husband who wanted to expand our family. During those same weeks, she'd been sleeping with Marcus and had presumably gotten pregnant during one of their business trips. I remembered our joy when she'd told me about the pregnancy. We'd celebrated with champagne, sparkling cider for her, and called our parents with the good news. We discussed names, painted the nursery, assembled the crib together. I'd held her hand during ultrasounds, felt the baby kick, talked to him through her belly. All the while she'd known he wasn't mine. The betrayal felt physical now, like a weight pressing against my chest. How had she looked at me during those moments? How had she maintained the facade of excited expectancy when she knew I was falling in love with another man's child? I thought about the labor and delivery, how I'd been her birthing partner, holding her hand through contractions, coaching her breathing, cutting the umbilical cord that connected her to a baby who would never really be mine. Marcus had arrived later with flowers, but now I wondered if Sarah had called him first. Had I been the second person to know my son was born? The most devastating realization was that this deception would have continued indefinitely. If Michael had looked more like me, if I hadn't grown suspicious, if I hadn't taken that DNA test, Sarah would have let me raise Marcus's child forever. She would have let me love him, provide for him, shape his character and values, all while knowing the fundamental truth of his paternity. 18 years of lies, college tuition for someone else's child, walking him down the aisle at his wedding someday, never knowing I had no biological claim to the young man I'd raised as my son. The scope of the deception was breathtaking in its completeness. I closed the calendar and put my head in my hands. Tomorrow I would need to make decisions about our future. Tomorrow I would need to think about lawyers and custody agreements and how to protect Emma and Jake from the fallout of their mother's choices. But tonight, I just sat in the darkness of my office, surrounded by evidence of a betrayal so complete that it had rewritten the entire story of my marriage. That night, I sat alone in my home office with Sarah's work calendar spread across my desk like evidence in a crime scene. She'd gone to bed early, claiming exhaustion, while I dove into the methodical work of understanding exactly how deeply I'd been deceived. Sarah's calendar told a story I'd been too trusting to read before. The client dinners that ran until midnight, the weekend strategy sessions that kept her away from family time, the business trips to conferences that seemed unusually frequent for someone in her position. Each entry now looked different through the lens of betrayal. March 2022. Late meeting with M. Peterson campaign. That was 3 months after Emma's birthday party, when Marcus had complimented Sarah's presentation skills and suggested they work more closely together. I remembered being proud of her advancement, encouraging her to take on more responsibility. April 2022. Overnight strategy session. Chicago. Sarah had called me from her hotel room that night, told me she missed me, asked about the kids' bedtime routine. While she was presumably conceiving another man's child, the timeline was sickeningly clear now. 2 years ago, Sarah had started staying late at work. 2 years ago, she'd become more distant physically, claiming stress and exhaustion. 2 years ago, our intimate life had begun to change in ways I'd attributed to the natural evolution of a long marriage. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our text exchanges from that period. Sarah's responses had become shorter, less engaged. Our usual playful banter had evolved into logistics about childcare and household responsibilities. When had I stopped noticing? When had I become so comfortable in our routine that I missed the signs of her growing detachment? The business trips were the worst part. Conference in Denver, client meetings in San Francisco, training seminars in Atlanta, a paper trail of opportunities for deception. I called the hotels listed on her expense reports, asking innocent questions about their conference facilities. 3 of them had no record of the business events Sarah claimed to attend. My hand shook as I realized the scope of the planning involved. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a single mistake. This was a calculated, sustained deception that had required Sarah to lie to me every single day for 24 months. Every "I love you," every family dinner, every intimate moment, all of it tainted by the knowledge that she was living a double life. The financial implications hit me next. I'd been supporting a lifestyle that included her affair. The dinners I thought were business expenses, the overnight trips, the new clothes she'd needed for client presentations. I'd been unknowingly funding my own betrayal. Worse, I'd been enthusiastically supportive, proud of her career advancement and increased responsibilities. I found her performance reviews from Peterson and Associates, documenting Marcus's praise for her dedication to going above and beyond, and her exceptional commitment to client relationships. The language felt obscene now, professional euphemisms for an affair that had been conducted under the guise of career development, but the cruelest discovery was hidden in her pregnancy timeline. Sarah had gotten pregnant with Michael 10 months ago. I could pinpoint the exact period because we'd been trying to conceive for months, and I'd been tracking her cycle with the dedication of a devoted husband who wanted to expand our family. During those same weeks, she'd been sleeping with Marcus and had presumably gotten pregnant during one of their business trips. I remembered our joy when she'd told me about the pregnancy. We'd celebrated with champagne, sparkling cider for her, and called our parents with the good news. We'd discussed names, painted the nursery, assembled the crib together. I'd held her hand during ultrasounds, felt the baby kick, talked to him through her belly. All the while she'd known he wasn't mine. The betrayal felt physical now, like a weight pressing against my chest. How had she looked at me during those moments? How had she maintained the facade of excited expectancy when she knew I was falling in love with another man's child? I thought about the labor and delivery, how I'd been her birthing partner, holding her hand through contractions, coaching her breathing, cutting the umbilical cord that connected her to a baby who would never really be mine. Marcus had arrived later with flowers, but now I wondered if Sarah had called him first. Had I been the second person to know my son was born? The most devastating realization was that this deception would have continued indefinitely. If Michael had looked more like me, if I hadn't grown suspicious, if I hadn't taken that DNA test, Sarah would have let me raise Marcus's child forever. She would have let me love him, provide for him, shape his character and values, all while knowing the fundamental truth of his paternity. 18 years of lies, college tuition for someone else's child, walking him down the aisle at his wedding someday, never knowing I had no biological claim to the young man I'd raised as my son. The scope of the deception was breathtaking in its completeness. I closed the calendar and put my head in my hands. Tomorrow I would need to make decisions about our future. Tomorrow I would need to think about lawyers and custody agreements and how to protect Emma and Jake from the fallout of their mother's choices. But tonight, I just sat in the darkness of my office, surrounded by evidence of a betrayal so complete that it had rewritten the entire story of my marriage. I waited until Saturday morning to confront Sarah again. The kids were at my mother's house for their weekly sleepover, giving us privacy for a conversation that would determine the future of our family. I'd spent the night reviewing everything I'd discovered, preparing myself for whatever lies or manipulation might come next. Sarah was feeding Michael in the kitchen when I walked in with her phone in my hand. I'd taken it from the nightstand while she slept, finally crossing the last line of trust in our marriage. What I'd found confirmed every suspicion I'd harbored and revealed betrayals I hadn't even imagined. "We need to finish our conversation," I said, placing her phone on the counter between us. She looked up from Michael's bottle, saw her phone, and immediately understood. The color drained from her face. Daniel, you can't just go through my personal. Personal? I interrupted. Sarah, you've been lying to me for 2 years. You're carrying on an affair with your boss and trying to pass off his child as mine. I think I'm entitled to some answers. Her hands trembled as she set down the bottle. Michael fussed at the interruption, but she seemed unable to focus on anything except her exposed phone. What did you find? Let's start with the text messages, I said, scrolling to the conversation thread with Marcus. Here's a good one from 3 weeks ago. He's so beautiful, Sarah, I can't stop thinking about holding my son. And your response, I know, baby. I wish things were different. Sarah's face crumpled. Daniel, please let me explain. Or this one from last month. When can we tell him the truth? I want to be a father to Michael. Your response, not yet. I need more time. Daniel thinks he's his. I looked up from the screen. Daniel thinks he's his. That's how you refer to me now? The fool who doesn't know he's raising another man's child? It's not like that, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I never wanted to hurt you, but you did hurt me, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. You've been hurting me every single day for 2 years. Every time you came home from being with him. Every time you let me believe this baby was mine. Every time you said you loved me while you were planning a life with someone else. She reached for Michael, pulling him against her chest like a shield. I do love you. I love our family. Marcus and I, it just happened. It wasn't supposed to mean anything. For 2 years? Sarah, this wasn't a one-night mistake. You've been in a relationship with him for 2 years. You've been planning to leave me for him. These text messages talk about divorce timelines and custody arrangements. You've been strategizing how to take Emma and Jake away from me. Her sob confirmed what I'd feared most. This wasn't just about an affair. She'd been planning to destroy our family entirely. He said he'd leave his wife, she said desperately. He promised we could be together. A real family with all the children? All the children? Sarah, Emma, and Jake are my children. They're not Marcus's family, and they never will be. He loves them too. Stop. I held up my hand, feeling rage building in my chest. Just stop. Marcus doesn't love Emma and Jake. He doesn't know them. He doesn't deserve them. And he sure as hell doesn't deserve the right to help raise them while I pay child support for a kid who isn't even mine. Sarah's breathing became ragged. What are you saying? I'm saying this ends now. Today, you need to choose, Sarah. Either you end things with Marcus immediately, commit to marriage counseling, and sign a legal document acknowledging Michael's paternity, or I'm filing for divorce and fighting for custody of my biological children. You can't take Emma and Jake away from me, she said, panic creeping into her voice. I'm not taking them away. You're the one who decided to have an affair and create this situation. You're the one who chose Marcus over our family. I'm just protecting what's actually mine. She set Michael in his bouncer and moved toward me. Daniel, please, we can work this out. I'll end things with Marcus. We can go to counseling. Michael doesn't have to know. Michael will always know, Sarah. Look at him. He looks exactly like his father, and his father isn't me. What happens when he gets older and people start asking questions? What happens when Emma and Jake figure out their little brother doesn't look like anyone in our family? We'll figure it out? No. I stepped back from her reaching hands. We won't figure it out because there is no we anymore. You destroyed that when you decided to build a life with Marcus while pretending to build one with me. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A text message from Marcus. Thinking about you and Michael. Can't wait to see you both later. I showed her the screen. He's expecting to see you today. While I'm here taking care of a child I thought was my son. Sarah's silence was answer enough. Pack a bag, I said quietly. Take Michael and go to Marcus's house. I want you both gone by the time I pick up Emma and Jake from my mother's. Daniel, you can't just throw us out. I'm not throwing you out. I'm giving you what you've been planning for 2 years anyway. Go be with the man you chose. Take his child. Start the life you've been building behind my back. What about Emma and Jake? What about them? They're staying with their father. You can see them when we work out a custody arrangement. But they're not going to Marcus's house. They're not going to be part of your new family with him. Sarah looked around our kitchen desperately as if seeing it for the first time. This is my home too. Not anymore, I said. You made your choice. Now live with it. She gathered Michael's things with shaking hands, stuffing diapers and bottles into his bag while tears fell steadily down her face. When she was ready to leave, she turned back to me one last time. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never meant for this to happen. Yes, you did, I replied. Maybe not at first, but at some point you decided this was what you wanted. You decided Marcus and his child were worth more than our marriage and our family. So go be with them and stop pretending you're sorry for getting what you wanted. She left without another word, taking Michael and 8 years of marriage with her. I stood in my empty kitchen, surrounded by the silence of a home that would never be the same, and felt the first stirring of something I hadn't experienced in months. Relief. Monday morning found me sitting in the waiting room of Harper & Associates Family Law, clutching a manila folder containing copies of the DNA test results, Sarah's text messages, and her work calendar. I'd chosen Patricia Harper based on online reviews that praised her fierce advocacy for fathers' rights and her no-nonsense approach to complex custody cases. The office walls displayed her law degree from Georgetown and various awards for family law excellence. Framed photos showed her with clients who looked genuinely happy, families preserved or justly divided, depending on the circumstances. I hoped I'd be joining their ranks soon. Mr. Matthews, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes, extended her hand. I'm Patricia Harper. Please come in. Her office was efficiently organized, with law books lining one wall and a large mahogany desk dominating the space. She gestured to a chair across from her desk and opened a legal pad, pen poised to take notes. Tell me about your situation, she said simply. I handed her the custody agreement draft I'd found among Sarah's papers, another devastating discovery from my weekend investigation. My wife has been having an affair with her boss for 2 years. She got pregnant with his child and tried to pass the baby off as mine. I found this in her desk drawer. Patricia examined the document with professional detachment. The custody agreement outlined Sarah's ideal scenario: joint custody of all 3 children, including Michael, with Daniel paying child support for a child who wasn't biologically his. Marcus was listed as a family friend who would assist with childcare responsibilities. Have you seen this before? She asked. No. I found it hidden in her desk. It's dated 6 months ago, which means she was planning this while she was still pregnant, while I was still believing the child was mine. Patricia made several notes before looking up. Do you have proof that the child isn't yours? I handed her the DNA test results. She reviewed them carefully, then set them aside. And proof of the affair? The text messages between Sarah and Marcus painted a clear picture of their relationship timeline, their future plans, and their discussion about when to reveal the truth about Michael's paternity. Patricia read through them methodically, occasionally raising an eyebrow at particularly damaging exchanges. This is quite comprehensive, she said finally. Your wife and her affair partner have essentially documented their entire relationship and their intentions regarding all 3 children. This significantly strengthens your position. What are my rights regarding my biological children? Excellent question. In this state, biological fathers have strong custody rights, especially when the mother's judgment can be called into question. The affair, the deception about paternity, and the attempt to manipulate you into financially supporting another man's child all work in your favor. She pulled out a standard custody agreement template and began making notes. I'm recommending we pursue primary custody of Emma and Jake, with your wife receiving supervised visitation until she demonstrates stability. The fact that she was planning to uproot them and move them into a household with her affair partner shows questionable judgment regarding their welfare. What about alimony? Child support? Here's where the documentation becomes crucial. Typically, you might owe spousal support, but the affair and the deception regarding paternity constitute grounds for reducing or eliminating alimony. As for child support, you'll pay for Emma and Jake, but you have no legal obligation to support Michael. Relief washed over me. None at all. None. The DNA test proves he's not your biological child, and there's no adoption paperwork establishing legal paternity. Your name might be on the birth certificate, but that can be amended once paternity is legally established with the biological father. She continued writing notes on the custody template. I'm also recommending we petition for Marcus to be held financially responsible for Michael immediately. If he's going to play father, he needs to start paying for the privilege. Can we protect my assets? The house? My retirement accounts? Absolutely. The affair constitutes marital misconduct in this state, which affects property division. We can argue that any marital assets spent supporting the affair, hotel bills, dinners, gifts, should be reimbursed from her portion of the settlement. I thought about all those business dinners I'd unknowingly funded, all the trips that were actually romantic getaways. She spent thousands of our money on this relationship, then we'll recover thousands in the settlement. Do you want to keep the family home? Yes. It's Emma and Jake's home. I don't want to uproot them any more than necessary. Patricia made more notes. We'll argue for you to retain the house based on the children's stability needs and your wife's decision to abandon the family home for her affair partner. Given the circumstances, it's very achievable. She outlined the timeline: filing for divorce immediately, requesting emergency custody orders to formalize the current arrangement, and beginning discovery to gather additional evidence of the affair and Sarah's deception. I need to warn you, she said seriously. Your wife's attorney will likely argue that you're being vindictive by excluding Michael from custody arrangements. They'll try to paint you as cruel for rejecting a child you've bonded with. But he's not my child, I said firmly. Legally, you're absolutely correct. Emotionally, it's more complex. Are you prepared for that argument? I thought about Michael's blue-gray eyes, so different from Emma and Jake's. About the nights I'd walked the floor with him, believing he was mine. About the love I'd felt that was built on a fundamental lie. I'm prepared. He has a father, and it's not me. Marcus wanted this child, planned for this child, and should raise this child. I won't be manipulated into providing for another man's family while losing access to my own children. Patricia nodded approvingly. Good. That clarity will serve you well in court. She handed me a retainer agreement and outlined her fees. I'll need $5,000 to start, and we'll bill hourly from there. Based on the evidence you've provided, I expect this to be straightforward, but we should prepare for your wife to fight the custody arrangement. As I signed the retainer agreement, I felt a mixture of determination and sadness. This legal document represented the official end of my marriage and the beginning of a new chapter focused entirely on protecting Emma and Jake. One more thing, Patricia said as I prepared to leave. Document everything. Every interaction with your wife. Every time she sees the children, every attempt at manipulation or guilt. This case is about protecting your children's welfare and your financial future. Don't let emotion compromise either objective. Walking out of her office, I felt armed with knowledge and legal protection. The custody agreement draft that had once represented my worst nightmare was now evidence in my favor. Sometimes the very documents meant to destroy you become the tools of your salvation. The children's drawings were scattered across the coffee table like accusations. Emma had drawn our family the week before. Stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Mommy, Daddy, Emma, Jake, and baby Michael, all smiling with perfectly round circles for heads. Now I had to tell them that family no longer existed. I'd spent hours researching how to explain divorce to children, reading articles about age-appropriate language and emotional support strategies. But no parenting guide covered how to tell your 6- and 4-year-old that their mother had been lying about their baby. Brother's parentage while planning to leave their father. Emma and Jake sat on either side of me on the couch, still in their pajamas from our Saturday morning pancake tradition. They'd been asking about Sarah all week, wondering why Mommy was staying with Uncle Marcus and when she'd come home. I'd been stalling, hoping to find the right words that didn't exist. I need to talk to you both about something very important, I began, pulling them closer. You know how Mommy has been staying somewhere else this week? Emma nodded solemnly. Is she sick? Tommy's mom went away when she was sick. No, sweetheart. Mommy isn't sick, but sometimes grown-ups make decisions that change families. And I need to help you understand what's happening to ours. Jake, thumb in his mouth despite our efforts to break the habit, looked up at me with wide eyes. Is Mommy coming home? Mommy is going to live in a different house for a while. She's going to stay with Uncle Marcus and take care of baby Michael there. Why can't she take care of Michael here? Emma asked, her artistic mind always seeking logical connections. This was the impossible part, explaining Michael's parentage without destroying their innocence or their relationship with their mother. Sometimes babies need to live with different families than we expect. Michael is going to live with his daddy, and his daddy isn't me. Emma's forehead wrinkled in confusion. But you're Michael's daddy. You fed him bottles and changed his diapers. I know I did those things because I love taking care of babies. But Michael's real daddy is Uncle Marcus, and Michael is going to live with him and Mommy. Jake removed his thumb long enough to ask, Are we going to live with Uncle Marcus too? No, buddy. You and Emma are going to stay here with me. This is your home, with your toys and your rooms and your friends nearby. You'll visit Mommy sometimes, but you'll live here where everything is familiar. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Don't you and Mommy love each other anymore? The question pierced through all my careful preparation. How do you explain adult betrayal to a child who still believes in fairy tales and happy endings? Sometimes love gets complicated, sweetheart. Mommy and I both love you and Jake very, very much, and that will never change. But we can't live together anymore, so we're going to take care of you in different houses. Like Sophie's parents? Emma asked. Her friend Sophie had been shuttling between divorced parents all year, which had sparked many questions about why some families live separately. Yes, like Sophie's parents. You'll have a schedule where sometimes you're here with me and sometimes you visit Mommy. Jake crawled into my lap, seeking comfort in physical closeness. Will you still make pancakes on Saturdays? Every Saturday, buddy. And we'll still read bedtime stories and go to the park and do all our favorite things together. Emma picked up her family drawing, studying the stick figures with new understanding. Should I draw a new picture without Mommy? The question broke my heart. You can draw whatever makes you happy. If you want to draw pictures of our family here, or pictures of Mommy and Michael, or pictures of anything else, all of that is okay. She carefully tore the paper, separating the stick figure of Sarah and Michael from the rest of us. The symbolism was unintentionally perfect and devastating. Will Michael remember us? Jake asked quietly. I thought about the baby who'd never really been ours, who I'd loved completely based on a lie. Michael is very little, so he might not remember. But you'll always be his big brother and sister even if you don't live together. Can we still love him? Emma asked with the pure heart of a child who doesn't understand adult complications. Of course you can love him. Love doesn't stop just because people live in different places. We spent the rest of the morning looking through photo albums, with Emma and Jake asking questions about which memories were still real and which had changed. They seemed to understand instinctively that some parts of their family story had been rewritten, but they approached it with the remarkable adaptability that children possess. Daddy, Emma said as I was preparing lunch, are you sad about Mommy leaving? I knelt down to her level, looking into eyes that were exactly like my own. Yes, sweetheart. I'm very sad about some things that happened, but I'm also happy that I get to take care of you and Jake and make sure you're safe and loved. We'll take care of you too, she said seriously, wrapping her small arms around my neck. Jake joined the hug, his little voice muffled against my shoulder. We're still a family, right, Daddy? Just smaller? We're absolutely still a family, I assured them. The most important kind of family. The kind that stays together no matter what. As we held each other in our kitchen, I realized that Emma and Jake were showing me something I'd forgotten in the devastation of betrayal. Family wasn't about perfect pictures or traditional structures. Family was about the people who stayed, who chose each other every day, who found ways to love despite the complications adults created. Their drawings might need to be redrawn, but the love connecting us remained unchanged. In the end, that's what would carry us through. The house key felt heavier than it should have as I held it in my palm, preparing to hand it over to Sarah. 2 weeks had passed since our confrontation. 2 weeks of her living with Marcus while lawyers exchanged formal letters about custody arrangements and property division. Now she was back to collect the remainder of her belongings and Michael's things, making our separation official. Emma and Jake were at school, sparing them the emotional weight of watching their mother pack up the remnants of our shared life. I'd deliberately scheduled the meeting during school hours, determined to keep the children insulated from the adult drama that had shattered our family. Sarah stood in my living room, looking smaller somehow than I remembered. Dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't been sleeping well, and her clothes hung loose on her frame, as if the stress had been consuming her from the inside. Michael was with Marcus's mother, she'd explained, avoiding my gaze as she spoke his name. I brought boxes, she said unnecessarily, gesturing to the stack of cardboard containers by the front door. Her voice was hoarse, uncertain, nothing like the confident woman who'd managed marketing campaigns and community events with effortless grace. Take whatever you need, I replied, staying by the window to maintain distance. I've already removed anything that belongs to Emma and Jake. She moved through the house like a ghost, packing 8 years of shared memories into corrugated containers. Wedding photos from the mantel, her grandmother's china from the dining room cabinet, the throw pillows she'd insisted would brighten up our neutral sofa. Each item represented a decision we'd made together, a moment when we'd believed we were building something permanent. I watched her pack the coffee maker we'd received as a wedding gift, the one we'd used every morning for nearly a decade. How many conversations had we shared over coffee in our kitchen? How many of those conversations had taken place while she was already involved with Marcus, already planning a different future? Daniel, she said softly, turning from the bookshelf where she was selecting novels and photo albums. I know you don't want to hear this, but I need to say it. I'm sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry for what I did to you, to our family. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since discovering the truth. The woman I'd married, the mother of my children, the person I'd trusted with my heart and my future. She seemed like a stranger now, someone wearing Sarah's face but carrying the weight of choices I couldn't understand. Are you sorry for having the affair? I asked, or sorry for getting caught? She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Both, all of it. I never meant for any of this to happen, but it did happen, Sarah. For 2 years it happened. Every single day you made the choice to continue lying to me. Every night you came home to me and the kids, you were living a double life. I know. Do you? I stepped away from the window, finally allowing the anger I'd been suppressing to surface. Do you understand what you've done? You destroyed our marriage. You lied about our child. You were planning to take Emma and Jake away from me to play house with your boss. I would never have kept Emma and Jake from you, she said desperately. You're their father. According to your custody agreement draft, I was going to be a weekend dad who paid child support for a kid who isn't mine. That doesn't sound like co-parenting, Sarah. That sounds like theft. She began crying then, soft sobs that might have moved me 2 weeks ago. Now they seemed like another manipulation, another attempt to avoid accountability for her choices. Marcus said he loved me, she whispered. He said he wanted a life with me and the children. He painted this picture of a blended family where everyone would be happy. And what does Marcus say now? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. Her silence confirmed my suspicion. Marcus, faced with the reality of his affair becoming public knowledge, was already having second thoughts. The fantasy of playing house with Sarah and her children was colliding with the messy reality of divorce proceedings, custody battles, and social consequences. He's having problems with his wife, she admitted. She's threatening to take their kids and move back to her mother's in California. His partners at the firm are asking questions about his relationship with a subordinate. Everything is more complicated than we expected. So he's abandoning you and Michael? Not abandoning. Just needing space to figure things out. I almost laughed at the familiar language of commitment-phobic men. Marcus had gotten what he wanted. The affair, the excitement, the forbidden relationship. But when faced with actual responsibility for his choices, he was retreating into vague promises of future consideration. Sarah, do you understand what you've given up? We had a good marriage. We had beautiful children, a stable home, a future we were building together. You threw all of that away for a man who's already backing away when things get difficult. I know, she sobbed. I know what I had and I know what I've lost. I wake up every morning and remember what I did to you, to us. I have to live with that for the rest of my life. I watched her pack the last of her books, her movements mechanical and defeated. The confident woman who'd managed million-dollar marketing campaigns had been reduced to someone begging for understanding from the husband she'd betrayed. The house key, I said, extending my palm. She looked at the key in my hand as if it represented everything she was losing, which in a way it did. The key to our home, to our life together, to the family she'd chosen to fracture. Can I? She started, then stopped. Can I see Emma and Jake before I go? They're at school. We agreed it was better if they weren't here for this. She nodded, accepting another boundary in our new reality. Will you tell them I love them? They know you love them, Sarah. That was never the question. She placed the key in my palm, her fingers brushing mine for just a moment. The contact felt strange, foreign, like touching someone I'd never really known. I'll pick them up for my visitation on Wednesday, she said, gathering her purse and the last small box of personal items. Supervised visitation, I corrected, at the family center as outlined in the temporary order. Another reminder of how completely our relationship had changed. We were no longer husband and wife, no longer partners in raising our children. We were now legal adversaries with court-ordered guidelines governing every interaction. After she left, I walked through the house, noting the empty spaces where her belongings had been, the gaps on the bookshelf, the bare spots on the walls where her artwork had hung, the silence in rooms that had once hummed with the energy of a full family. But alongside the emptiness, I felt something unexpected: peace. The house felt honest now, free from the deception that had been poisoning our home for 2 years. Whatever came next, it would be built on truth rather than lies. When Emma and Jake came home from school, they'd find a house that looked different but felt more secure. Their father, their real family, the people who chose to stay. Sometimes the most important moves aren't about going somewhere new. They're about finally being where you belong. The flood of text messages started at 2:17 a.m. on a Tuesday night, lighting up my phone like a distress beacon in the darkness of my bedroom. I'd learned to keep my phone on silent since Sarah had moved out, but the constant buzzing against my nightstand eventually woke me from the first decent sleep I'd had in weeks. 43 messages, all from Sarah. Daniel, please answer your phone. We need to talk. I made a terrible mistake. The biggest mistake of my life. Marcus isn't who I thought he was. He's not the man he pretended to be. He wants me to give Michael up for adoption. Can you believe that? His wife found out about the baby and she's filing for divorce. He's panicking. He told his partners I seduced him, that I'm an unstable employee who got obsessed with him. Please call me back. I know you hate me, but I have nowhere else to turn. I scrolled through the messages with a mixture of exhaustion and grim satisfaction. Marcus, faced with real consequences for his choices, was revealing his true character. The man who'd promised Sarah a blended family and a future together was now throwing her under the bus to protect his own reputation and marriage. The messages continued in increasingly frantic succession. He never loved me. He used me and now he's discarding me like garbage. I've lost everything. My husband, my children, my home, my job, everything. The only good thing in my life was our family, and I destroyed it for someone who never cared about me. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but Emma and Jake need their mother. Michael needs his mother. I'll do anything to fix this. Anything to get my family back. Please, Daniel. I'm begging you. Don't let my mistakes destroy our children's lives. I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling, processing the desperation in her messages. This was Sarah at her lowest point, facing the full consequences of her choices without the fantasy of a life with Marcus to cushion the impact. The man she'd traded her family for had revealed himself to be exactly what I could have told her he was. Someone willing to use her but not willing to sacrifice anything meaningful for her. The next morning brought more messages, sent at intervals suggesting she hadn't slept at all. I quit my job. I couldn't face the humiliation of working for him. His wife called me a home-wrecking slut in front of the whole office. I'm staying at a motel near the highway. Room 237 if you want to see how far I've fallen. Michael cries constantly. I think he knows something's wrong. I can't afford daycare or rent or even groceries on my own. You were right about everything. About Marcus. About what kind of man he really is. I should have fought for our marriage instead of running away from it. I showed some of the messages to Patricia Harper during our weekly legal consultation. She read them with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen many cheating spouses face the reality of their choices. This is classic post-affair regret, she explained. The fantasy relationship has collapsed and she's realizing what she actually gave up. The question is whether this remorse is genuine or just panic at finding herself alone. Does it matter? I asked. For legal purposes, no. These messages actually help our case by showing her unstable mental state and poor judgment. For your personal decision-making, it might matter more. That evening, Sarah called repeatedly while I was helping Emma with her homework and getting Jake ready for his bath. I let each call go to voicemail, focusing on our evening routine, the bedtime stories, the glass of water, the nightlight Emma needed to feel safe in the dark. Later, I listened to the voicemails. Daniel, I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need you to know that Marcus is telling people at work that Michael might not even be his. He's suggesting I was sleeping with multiple men. He's rewriting our entire relationship to make himself look like the victim. 2 years of promising me a future, and now he's acting like I was a crazy employee who stalked him. I'm going to lose my apartment. Marcus was supposed to help with the security deposit, but now he won't return my calls. Emma called me today asking when I'm coming home. How do I explain that Mommy made choices that mean she can't come home? I see the drawings she made at school. Our family separated on different sides of the paper. I did that to my own children. Please just talk to me for 5 minutes. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm drowning here. By Thursday, the messages had taken on a different tone. I hired a lawyer. She says I have rights as the children's mother. I'm not going to just disappear from Emma and Jake's lives because you're angry with me. Michael is your son too, in every way that matters. You raised him, you loved him. You bonded with him. A real man wouldn't abandon a child just because of DNA. I'll fight for joint custody of all 3 children if I have to. The shift from desperate pleading to threats and manipulation was swift and predictable. Sarah, faced with the reality that I wasn't going to rescue her from the consequences of her choices, was now attempting to weaponize guilt and legal pressure. Friday brought the most revealing message of all. Marcus's wife served him with divorce papers today. She's asking for full custody and claiming he's an unfit father because of the affair. He's blaming me for ruining his life and destroying his family. He actually told his lawyer that I'm a manipulative woman who seduced him and trapped him with a pregnancy. After 2 years of telling me he loved me and wanted a life with me, he's painting me as some kind of predator who destroyed his perfect marriage. I felt no satisfaction in Sarah's pain, but I did feel validated in my assessment of Marcus's character. He was exactly the kind of man who would pursue a married woman for 2 years, father a child with her, make promises about their future together, and then abandon her the moment his own comfort was threatened. The final message that week came Sunday evening. I understand now why you can't forgive me. I didn't just cheat on you. I chose someone who was never worthy of what I was giving up. I traded our family, our love, our future for a man who doesn't even have the courage to claim his own child. I made the worst possible choice, and now I have to live with the consequences. But Emma and Jake shouldn't have to live with them too. Please don't punish them for my mistakes. I turned off my phone and sat in the quiet of my living room, listening to the sounds of my children sleeping upstairs. Sarah was learning what I'd realized weeks ago, that actions have consequences, that trust once broken is nearly impossible to rebuild, and that some choices change everything forever. Her desperation was real, her regret was genuine, and her situation was exactly what she'd chosen. When she decided Marcus was worth more than our marriage, I felt sympathy for her pain, but I wouldn't allow that sympathy to compromise the stability and security I was building for Emma and Jake. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone who has hurt you is to let them face the full weight of their choices without offering rescue. Sarah had made her decision. Now she had to learn to live with it. The apartment lease sat on my kitchen counter like a declaration of independence. 2 bedrooms, 2 baths, ground floor with a small patio that backed up to the elementary school playground where Emma and Jake could see their friends after school. Not the sprawling suburban home we'd shared as a family of 5, but a place that would be entirely ours, built on honesty instead of lies. Are we really moving, Daddy? Emma asked for the 3rd time that morning, studying the lease agreement with the serious concentration she applied to everything important in her 6-year-old world. We're getting a second home, I explained, using language that felt less frightening than moving out or starting over. You'll still have your rooms here, but we're going to have a special place that's just for us 3. Jake, now 4 and increasingly verbal about his preferences, looked up from his bowl of cereal. Will it have a playground? Right outside our back door, buddy. You can see it from your bedroom window. The decision to get the apartment had been practical as much as emotional. Sarah's supervised visitations were taking place at a neutral family center, but eventually we'd need a space where she could spend time with Emma and Jake that wasn't loaded with memories of our failed marriage. The apartment would be neutral territory, a place where the children could maintain a relationship with their mother without the constant reminders of our fractured family home. More importantly, it would be a place where we could build new traditions, create new memories, and establish routines that belonged entirely to us. No shadows of Marcus in our kitchen, no ghosts of Sarah's deception in our living room. I'd spent weeks researching the neighborhood, visiting during different times of day to assess safety, walkability, and the general feeling of community. The apartment complex had a playground, a pool, and several other single-parent families. Emma had already made friends with a girl named Sophie whose parents were divorced, giving her a peer who understood the complexities of living between 2 homes. When can we decorate our rooms? Emma asked, her artistic instincts already planning the creative possibilities of blank walls and empty spaces. This weekend. We'll go to the store and pick out paint colors, maybe some new bedding that you choose yourselves. The prospect of having control over their environment seemed to excite both children. At the family home, they'd always lived within the aesthetic decisions Sarah and I had made together. The apartment would be their first chance to express their own preferences, to help create a space that reflected their personalities. My own room would be simple, functional, focused on rest and recovery rather than romance. I'd chosen a neutral color scheme and minimal furniture, wanting a space that felt calm and uncluttered after the emotional chaos of recent months. No wedding photos, no couples artwork, nothing that referenced the life I'd shared with Sarah. The financial implications of maintaining 2 residences were significant but manageable. The apartment rent, combined with the mortgage on our family home, stretched my budget but didn't break it. I'd rather live modestly and maintain stability for Emma and Jake than engage in an expensive legal battle over property division that might take years to resolve. Patricia Harper had been supportive of the apartment decision, seeing it as evidence of my commitment to providing stable housing for the children, regardless of the circumstances. Judges like to see parents who prioritize their children's stability over their own comfort, she'd explained. During our last meeting, the move itself was planned for a Saturday, when Emma and Jake would be with Sarah for their supervised visitation. I wanted the apartment fully set up before they saw it, their rooms decorated and their belongings arranged in ways that felt welcoming rather than temporary. I'd hired movers to transport the furniture I'd selected from our family home: beds, dressers, the dining table where we'd eaten breakfast every morning for years. Anything that belonged specifically to Emma and Jake would make the transition with us. Their books, toys, art supplies, and the stuffed animals that provided comfort during uncertain times. The evening before the move, I sat with both children on our living room couch, looking through photo albums and helping them choose pictures for their new bedrooms. Emma selected photos from family vacations, birthday parties, and school events, images that captured happy memories without including the complications of Michael and Sarah's deception. Jake was more interested in pictures of himself and Emma together, siblings bonding over shared experiences and inside jokes. His instinct to focus on his relationship with his sister, rather than the family dynamics that confused him, seemed healthy and wise. "Will Mommy ever come to our new apartment?" Emma asked as we packed the photo albums in a box labeled Kids' Memories. "Mommy will visit you there sometimes," I explained carefully. "It will be a place where you can spend time with her without any sadness or confusion about our old house." "What about Michael?" The question I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. "Michael will stay with his daddy just like you stay with your daddy. But if Mommy brings him to visit, that's okay too." Emma nodded solemnly, apparently satisfied with the explanation. At 6, she was beginning to understand that family relationships could be more complex than the simple nuclear structure she'd grown up believing was universal. That night, I lay in my bed at the family home for the last time before the apartment lease began, listening to Emma and Jake's steady breathing from their rooms down the hall. Tomorrow we would wake up in a space that represented possibility rather than loss, future rather than past. The apartment lease represented more than just housing. It was a legal document that established my independence from the marriage that had defined my adult life. For the first time in 8 years, I was making decisions based entirely on what was best for my children and myself, without considering a partner who might have been lying to me. As I drifted off to sleep, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Excitement about the future, not the cautious hope of someone trying to salvage something broken, but the genuine anticipation of someone about to build something new from the ground up. Emma, Jake, and I were about to discover what our family looked like when it was based on truth, trust, and unconditional love. The apartment lease was just the beginning. The court documents arrived on a Monday morning, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as he handed me the thick manila envelope. Inside were Sarah's formal responses to our divorce filing, along with her counter-petition that made my stomach clench with anger and disbelief. She was asking for joint custody of all 3 children, including Michael, who the DNA test had proven wasn't mine. She wanted alimony, half of our marital assets, and child support for Emma, Jake, and Michael. Her legal strategy was clear: pretend the affair never happened, ignore the paternity test results, and paint me as a vindictive husband trying to punish her for unspecified marital difficulties. Patricia. Harper spread the documents across her conference table with the methodical precision of someone who'd seen every possible variation of marital deception and legal maneuvering. "Your wife's attorney is taking an aggressive approach," she observed, reviewing Sarah's counterpetition line by line. "They're arguing that you've acted as Michael's father since birth, which creates a legal presumption of paternity regardless of biological connection. But the DNA test is powerful evidence, but not necessarily determinative if they can prove you willingly accepted parental responsibility. The question becomes whether your care for Michael was based on deception or willing assumption of fatherhood." I thought about all those midnight feedings, the diaper changes, the pediatrician appointments where I'd proudly filled out forms listing myself as Michael's father. Every act of love had been based on a lie, but would the court see it that way? "They're also claiming that your demand for primary custody of Emma and Jake is retaliatory, rather than in the children's best interests," Patricia continued. Sarah's attorney is painting her affair as a temporary lapse in judgment while portraying you as someone using the children as weapons in a vindictive divorce. The characterization stung because it touched on my deepest fear that I might be hurting Emma and Jake in my effort to protect them from their mother's poor judgment. But watching Sarah's breakdown over the past weeks, her instability and desperate attempts at manipulation, I knew that my primary obligation was to provide them with security and honesty. "What's our response strategy?" I asked. Patricia pulled out a folder thick with evidence we'd been compiling. "We document everything. The affair, the deception about paternity, her mental instability, and Marcus's abandonment of both her and Michael. We show the court that Sarah's judgment regarding the children's welfare is fundamentally compromised." She showed me our counterfiling, a document that laid out the timeline of Sarah's affair with clinical precision. Text messages between Sarah and Marcus discussing their future together. Hotel receipts from business trips that never happened. The custody agreement draft Sarah had hidden in her desk. proving she'd been planning to manipulate me into supporting another man's child, while limiting my access to my biological children. The paternity issue works strongly in our favor, Patricia explained. Courts don't typically force men to pay child support for children who aren't biologically theirs, especially when conception was the result of adultery and deception. What about alimony? Adultery affects spousal support calculations in this state. Combined with her decision to leave the marriage for another man, we can argue for minimal or no alimony. The fact that she quit her job to avoid the embarrassment of working for Marcus actually helps our case. It shows poor judgment and an unwillingness to take responsibility for her choices. We spent 2 hours reviewing every aspect of the case, from asset division to custody schedules to the financial obligations each parent would bear. The process was exhausting and emotionally draining, reducing 8 years of marriage to legal arguments and financial calculations. I need you to understand something, Patricia said as we concluded the meeting. Sarah's attorney is going to try to make this as contentious as possible. They'll argue that you're being cruel to Michael, vindictive towards Sarah, and manipulative with Emma and Jake. They'll try to make you look like the villain in this situation. But I'm not the one who had the affair, I protested. No, but you're the one asking for primary custody and refusing financial responsibility for a child you've been caring for. From their perspective, that makes you look heartless, regardless of the circumstances that led to this situation. The next few weeks brought a series of legal maneuvers that felt like psychological warfare. Sarah's attorney requested detailed financial records going back 5 years, apparently looking for evidence that I'd been hiding assets or planning the divorce before discovering the affair. They demanded testimony from Emma and Jake's teachers, presumably hoping to find evidence that my parenting had been affected by the marital stress. Most disturbingly, they requested a psychological evaluation for all parties, including the children. The idea of putting Emma and Jake through clinical interviews about their family relationships made me physically ill, but Patricia assured me it was a standard request in contested custody cases. The good news is that psychological evaluations usually favor the stable parent, she explained. Your employment history, housing situation, and consistent care for the children will work in your favor. Sarah's affair, job loss, and current instability will work against her. The court date was set for 6 weeks away, giving both sides time to complete discovery and prepare their cases. In the meantime, the temporary custody order remained in effect. Emma and Jake stayed with me while Sarah continued her supervised visitations at the family center, spent evenings after the children were asleep reviewing legal documents and preparing for depositions. The process felt surreal, reducing the most intimate aspects of my life to evidence in a legal proceeding. Love letters Sarah had written me during our engagement, now being examined for evidence of the stability of our early relationship. Photos from family vacations, being analyzed for signs of marital discord. Text messages between us about household logistics, scrutinized for evidence of financial planning or parental competence. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy for Emma and Jake while preparing for a legal battle that would determine the structure of their childhood. They knew Mommy and Daddy were getting divorced, but they didn't need to know about custody evaluations, financial discovery, or their mother's attempt to claim child support for a baby who wasn't their father's biological son. On Thursday evening, I received a call from Patricia with an unexpected development. Marcus has been served with a paternity suit, she informed me. Sarah's attorney is trying to force him to take legal and financial responsibility for Michael. His response might affect our case significantly. How so? If Marcus acknowledges paternity and agrees to support Michael, it removes any argument that you should be responsible for the child. If he denies paternity or tries to avoid responsibility, Sarah's financial situation becomes more desperate, which could affect her ability to provide stable housing for any of the children. The next day brought another twist. Marcus had hired his own attorney and was preparing to fight the paternity suit, apparently preferring to spend money on legal fees rather than accept responsibility for his son. His attorney had issued a statement claiming that Sarah had been involved with multiple partners and that paternity couldn't be determined without additional testing. The statement was a lie, but it revealed Marcus's true character more clearly than anything I could have presented in court. He was willing to publicly humiliate Sarah and call her promiscuous rather than accept responsibility for the child he'd fathered and the family he'd helped destroy. As I reviewed the court documents that had invaded my kitchen table and consumed my evenings, I realized that this legal battle was about more than custody schedules and financial obligations. It was about establishing the truth in a situation where multiple parties had strong incentives to distort reality. The court would decide not just where Emma and Jake would live, but what version of our family's story would become the official record. Whether Sarah's affair would be acknowledged as a fundamental breach of trust or dismissed as a temporary marital difficulty. Whether my refusal to support Michael would be seen as principled boundary setting or vindictive punishment. In 6 weeks, a judge would determine the future of my children based on legal arguments, expert testimony, and evidence presented by attorneys who'd never lived through the devastation of discovering that your spouse has been lying to you for 2 years. The court documents represented the final stage of my marriage's dissolution, the legal machinery that would transform our private pain into public record, and our family's destruction into a case number in the family court system. The resignation letter arrived at Peterson and Associates on a Friday afternoon, just 3 days before Marcus was scheduled to be deposed in our divorce proceedings. I learned about it from Patricia, who'd received a call from Sarah's increasingly frustrated attorney. Marcus Peterson has resigned his position and is relocating to Denver. Patricia informed me during our phone call. Effective immediately. He's claiming the stress of the situation has made it impossible for him to continue in his current role. The cowardice was stunning even by Marcus's already low standards. Faced with the prospect of having to testify under oath about his 2-year affair with a subordinate, his promises to Sarah about their future together, and his financial obligations to Michael, he'd chosen to flee rather than face the consequences of his actions. What does this mean for our case? I asked. It actually strengthens our position significantly. A man who abandons his job and relocates to another state to avoid taking responsibility for his child isn't someone the court will view favorably. It also leaves Sarah in an even more precarious financial situation. Marcus's resignation letter, which I obtained through legal discovery, was a masterpiece of self-serving fiction. He claimed that false allegations from a disgruntled former employee had created a hostile work environment that made it impossible for him to fulfill his professional obligations. He painted himself as the victim of Sarah's obsessive pursuit, a dedicated family man whose reputation had been unfairly tarnished by a subordinate's inappropriate advances. The letter made no mention of Michael, no acknowledgement of the child he'd fathered, no acceptance of responsibility for the family he'd helped destroy. It was a complete abdication of accountability, wrapped in the language of professional victimhood. But Marcus's problems extended far beyond his resignation. His wife Jennifer had hired her own attorney and was pursuing an aggressive divorce strategy that made our case look amicable by comparison. She'd frozen their joint accounts, filed for emergency custody of their 2 young children, and was demanding that Marcus undergo psychological evaluation before being allowed any unsupervised visitation. The Peterson and Associates partners, faced with the liability of a sexual harassment claim and the embarrassment of their founding partner's affair with a subordinate, had apparently made it clear that Marcus's resignation was preferable to termination. The firm was conducting an internal investigation, reviewing Sarah's personnel file for evidence of inappropriate workplace conduct, and preparing to distance themselves from the scandal. Most damaging to Marcus's reputation was Jennifer's decision to make their divorce filing public record. The court documents she'd submitted painted a detailed picture of a man who'd been lying to his wife for 2 years while conducting an affair with a younger employee. Jennifer's attorney had included text messages, hotel receipts, and even photos of Marcus and Sarah together at company events. Building a comprehensive case for infidelity and deception. She's going for blood, Patricia observed after reviewing Jennifer's court filings. She wants full custody, maximum spousal support, and she's claiming that Marcus's affair created emotional trauma requiring therapy for both her and their children. The public nature of Jennifer's filing meant that Marcus's professional reputation was now permanently damaged. His name was associated with workplace harassment, marital infidelity, and child abandonment. The Denver law firm that had hired him would undoubtedly become aware of the circumstances surrounding his departure from Peterson and Associates. Meanwhile, Sarah was learning the harsh reality of Marcus's true character. The man who'd promised her a life together, who'd talked about blending their families and building a future, had abandoned her the moment his own comfort was threatened. He'd left her to face paternity suits, custody battles, and financial ruin while he relocated to start fresh in another state. The most revealing document in the discovery file was an email Marcus had sent to his attorney, accidentally copied to Sarah's lawyer through a clerical error. In it, Marcus outlined his strategy for avoiding financial responsibility for Michael. I need to establish plausible deniability regarding paternity. Sarah was my employee, and I had no knowledge of her personal relationships outside of work. Any physical contact between us was initiated by her, and I have no reason to believe I'm the father of her child. I'm willing to submit to DNA testing, but only under protest and with the understanding that my name will be removed from any birth certificate if paternity is not established with absolute certainty. The email revealed Marcus's complete moral bankruptcy. He was prepared to lie under oath, abandon his biological son, and destroy Sarah's credibility rather than accept responsibility for his choices. The man who'd spent 2 years promising Sarah a future together was now claiming he'd barely known her outside of professional interactions. Sarah's response to Marcus's abandonment had been predictably devastating. According to reports from the family center where she conducted supervised visitations with Emma and Jake, she'd become increasingly withdrawn and emotional. The social worker noted that she seemed overwhelmed by basic parenting tasks and frequently appeared distracted during visits. She asked me yesterday if Michael looked like Marcus. Emma told me after one of her visits with Sarah. She was crying when she asked it. The question broke my heart for multiple reasons. Sarah was finally confronting the reality that she'd destroyed her family for a man who'd never truly cared about her or their child. She was also processing the devastating truth that Michael would grow up without a father figure, because his biological father was too much of a coward to claim him. Marcus's retreat to Denver had eliminated any possibility of the fantasy family life Sarah had imagined. There would be no blended household, no shared custody between supportive co-parents, no happy ending where everyone learned to love and accept the complicated new family structure. Instead, Sarah was left as a single mother to a child whose father had legally and physically abandoned him. The resignation letter that Marcus thought would protect him from accountability had actually become evidence of his fundamental unreliability and moral cowardice. A judge would have no trouble determining that a man who fled to another state to avoid taking responsibility for his child was not someone whose version of events could be trusted. For Sarah, Marcus's departure meant facing the full consequences of her choices without the emotional or financial support she'd been promised. The man she'd traded her marriage for had revealed himself to be someone who would abandon her and their child the moment his own reputation was at stake. As I read through the legal documents detailing Marcus's systematic abdication of responsibility, I felt a complex mixture of vindication and sadness. Vindication because his actions proved everything I'd suspected about his character. Sadness because Emma and Jake would eventually understand that their mother had destroyed their family for someone who'd never been worthy of the sacrifice. Marcus's resignation letter would become a crucial piece of evidence in our case, proof that Sarah's judgment regarding men and relationships was fatally flawed. But more importantly, it was evidence that my children deserved a father who would never abandon them, never lie to them, and never trade their welfare for his own convenience. Unlike Marcus, I was staying to face whatever came next. The hospital admission forms arrived by fax at Patricia's office on a Wednesday morning, marking the lowest point in Sarah's devastating descent. She'd been admitted to Riverside Psychiatric Hospital after what the intake notes described as a complete mental health crisis involving suicidal ideation and inability to care for dependent minor child. I was at work when Patricia called with the news. Sarah's mother found her yesterday evening in her motel room with Michael crying in his crib while she was having what appears to be a complete breakdown. The baby hadn't been fed or changed for several hours. My first instinct was concern for Michael despite everything. An innocent child shouldn't suffer because of the poor choices and mental instability of the adults responsible for him. Is the baby okay? He's fine. Sarah's mother, Janet, has temporary custody and is caring for him. But this development significantly changes the dynamics of our case. The admission forms painted a heartbreaking picture of someone who'd lost everything and couldn't cope with the reality of her situation. Sarah had been found by her mother sitting on the floor of her motel room, staring blankly at the wall while Michael cried in his crib. When Janet tried to talk to her, Sarah had started screaming about how she destroyed everyone she loved and deserved to die for what she'd done. Marcus won't answer my calls, Sarah had told the intake psychiatrist according to the notes. He moved to Denver and changed his phone number. His lawyer sent me a letter saying he's not the father and will fight any paternity claims. I gave up my husband, my children, my home, my job, everything, for a man who threw me away like garbage the moment it became inconvenient to love me. The psychiatric evaluation revealed the depth of her psychological collapse. She'd been sleeping 2 hours a night, wasn't eating regularly, and had been crying for days at a time. She'd stopped showering, stopped cleaning her motel room, and had been neglecting Michael's basic needs because she couldn't function well enough to care for herself, let alone an infant. "I can't look at him without seeing Marcus," she'd told the psychiatrist about Michael. "But I can't give him up because he's all I have left of the life I thought I was going to have. I'm trapped with a constant reminder of my own stupidity." The admission notes included a suicide risk assessment that made my stomach clench with worry, despite everything Sarah had done to our family. She'd told the evaluating physician that she'd considered ending the pain permanently, but couldn't bring herself to leave Michael, completely alone in the world. Emma and Jake didn't know about their mother's hospitalization, and I intended to keep it that way until I could figure out how to explain it in terms they could understand. They'd been asking why they hadn't seen Mommy for their regular visits, and I'd been telling them she was sick and getting better with doctor's help. Janet called me that evening, her voice heavy with exhaustion and worry. "I know you have every right to hate Sarah for what she did to you and the children," she said. "But I'm asking you to please don't use this against her in court. She's genuinely sick, Daniel. She needs help, not punishment." "I'm not trying to punish her," I replied carefully. "I'm trying to protect Emma and Jake from instability. Sarah's breakdown proves that she's not in a position to provide safe, consistent care for children right now. She could get better with treatment," Janet pleaded. "She could go to therapy, take medication, learn to cope with what she's done. Don't use her worst moment to take away her children forever." I understood Janet's maternal instinct to protect her daughter, but I also understood my paternal obligation to protect mine. Sarah's mental health crisis wasn't something she'd chosen, but it was a direct result of the choices she had made. The breakdown showed what I'd feared all along, that her judgment and stability had been compromised for months, possibly years. Patricia was more direct in her assessment. "This hospitalization is evidence that Sarah is currently unfit to parent. A judge will have serious concerns about awarding custody to someone who's been institutionalized for mental health issues, especially when those issues stem from her own poor choices. But what if she gets treatment? What if she stabilizes? Then we'll address custody modifications if and when that happens. Right now, our obligation is to protect Emma and Jake from an unstable parent who's proven she can't take care of herself, let alone children." The hospital records revealed the extent of Sarah's psychological unraveling. She'd been experiencing panic attacks, severe depression, and what the psychiatrist described as acute adjustment disorder with mixed anxiety and depressed mood. Her inability to care for Michael had triggered a Child Protective Services investigation, though charges weren't filed due to her mother's immediate intervention. Most disturbingly, Sarah had been harboring fantasies about reconciliation with Marcus that bordered on delusional. She'd been calling his office daily even after his resignation, believing that if she could just explain her situation properly, he'd realize he loved her and wanted to be a father to Michael. She'd been checking flights to Denver, planning to show up at his new job to convince him to come back. She's been living in a fantasy world, the psychiatric notes revealed. Patient exhibits signs of obsessive thinking regarding former paramour and unrealistic expectations about relationship reconciliation. She appears unable to process the reality that the relationship has ended permanently. The treatment plan called for a minimum 72-hour hold, followed by ongoing outpatient therapy and medication management. Sarah would need to demonstrate consistent mental health stability before being considered safe to care for children without supervision. Reading through the psychiatric evaluation, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Anger at Sarah for creating this situation through her choices, sadness for the woman I'd married, who'd deteriorated so completely, worry about how her breakdown might affect Emma and Jake's understanding of their mother, and relief that my instincts about her instability had been validated by medical professionals. The hospital admission forms would become part of our court record, evidence that Sarah's judgment and mental health had been compromised well before the legal proceedings began. It would support our argument that Emma and Jake needed the stability and consistency that only I could provide. But beyond the legal implications, Sarah's breakdown forced me to confront the human cost of her choices. She'd traded our family for a fantasy relationship with someone who'd never truly cared about her. When that fantasy collapsed, she'd been left with nothing but the consequences of her deception. A child whose father had abandoned him, children who'd lost trust in her stability, and a life that bore no resemblance to the future she'd imagined. As I tucked Emma and Jake into bed that night, listening to their prayers for Mommy to get better soon, I realized that Sarah's breakdown was both the culmination of her poor choices and the beginning of a long journey toward accepting responsibility for what she'd done. The admission forms documented the moment when fantasy finally collided with reality, leaving Sarah with no choice but to face the devastating truth about the life she'd chosen to build. Emma's school report arrived on a Friday afternoon, and I opened it with the same trepidation I'd felt opening every official document over the past few months. Instead of another legal complication or emotional crisis, I found something unexpected. Evidence that my children were not just surviving our family's upheaval, but actually thriving. Emma Matthews continues to excel academically and socially, wrote Mrs. Peterson, her first-grade teacher. She demonstrates remarkable emotional maturity for her age and has become a natural leader among her peers. Her artwork has become increasingly sophisticated, showing themes of family, stability, and hope. She frequently talks about her father with obvious affection and respect. The report included samples of Emma's recent work, math sheets completed with careful precision, creative writing stories about a princess who lived with her father and little brother in a castle by a playground, and artwork depicting our apartment with bright colors and smiling stick figures. In every drawing, Emma had depicted our family of 3 with obvious happiness and security. Jake's preschool assessment was equally positive. His teacher noted that he'd overcome his earlier regression with potty training and thumb-sucking, behaviors that had emerged during the worst of the family crisis. He was sleeping through the night again, engaging enthusiastically with learning activities, and had made several close friendships with other children in his class. Jake talks constantly about his daddy and sister, his teacher had written. He's clearly bonded strongly with his family unit and demonstrates confidence and security in his home environment. His adjustment to the family changes has been remarkably smooth, suggesting strong support from his primary caregiver. Reading these assessments, I realized that my fears about traumatizing Emma and Jake through the divorce and custody battle had been largely unfounded. Children, I was learning, were remarkably resilient when provided with consistent love, honest, age-appropriate communication, and stable routines. The secret to our success had been maintaining normalcy in every aspect of their lives that I could control. We still had pancakes on Saturday mornings, still read bedtime stories every night, still went to the park after school when the weather was nice. The apartment had become a place of security rather than disruption, a home where they could count on their father being present, engaged, and emotionally available. I'd also been working with a family therapist, Dr. Rebecca Chen, who specialized in helping children adjust to divorce and family restructuring. She'd been meeting with Emma and Jake monthly, giving them tools to process their emotions and express their concerns about the changes in our family. "Your children are doing exceptionally well," Dr. Chen had told me during our last consultation. "They're processing the family changes in healthy ways and have maintained their sense of security and self-worth. This is a direct result of your consistent patient parenting during a very difficult time." The individual therapy I'd started for myself had also been transformative. For months, I'd been so focused on legal battles and practical concerns that I'd neglected my own emotional processing of Sarah's betrayal and our marriage's end. Working with Dr. Michael Torres, I'd begun to untangle 8 years of relationship patterns, identify the warning signs I'd missed, and develop strategies for eventual dating and remarriage. "You're not the same man who walked into my office 3 months ago," Dr. Torres observed during a recent session. "You've moved from reactive crisis management to proactive life building. That's a significant shift that will serve you and your children well." The therapy had helped me understand that Sarah's affair wasn't a reflection of my worth as a husband or father, but rather a manifestation of her own unresolved issues and poor decision-making. I'd stopped looking for ways I might have prevented her betrayal and started focusing on building the kind of life that would attract the kind of partner who valued honesty, commitment, and family stability. My work performance had also improved dramatically once the initial shock and legal complications had stabilized. My supervisor had noticed my increased focus and productivity, leading to discussions about potential promotion opportunities. The financial stability this represented meant I could provide even better security for Emma and Jake while building toward our long-term future. The apartment had evolved into something far beyond temporary housing. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator and her bedroom walls. Jake's toy collection had expanded to fill the living room in ways that would have driven Sarah crazy, but made me smile every day. We'd developed our own traditions: Thursday night pizza and movie nights, Saturday morning farmers market visits, Sunday afternoon bike rides around the neighborhood lake. Most importantly, I discovered aspects of single parenting that I genuinely enjoyed. Without the need to consult with a partner about discipline strategies or activity choices, I could respond to Emma and Jake's needs immediately and consistently. Our household ran on routines that made sense for our specific family dynamics, rather than compromises between different parenting styles. The children had also grown closer to my extended family during this period. My parents, who'd been diplomatic but distant during my marriage to Sarah, were now deeply involved in Emma and Jake's lives. My sister Kate had become like a second mother to them, taking them on adventures and providing female perspective that I couldn't offer. "You're a better father now than you were when you were married," Kate had observed during a recent family dinner. "You're more present, more confident, more attuned to what the kids actually need rather than what you think a perfect father should provide." The insight stung because it contained truth I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. During my marriage, I had often deferred to Sarah's parenting preferences, even when my instincts suggested different approaches. I'd been so focused on maintaining marital harmony that I'd sometimes compromised my effectiveness as a father. Now, as the sole decision-maker in Emma and Jake's daily lives, I'd discovered a parenting confidence I'd never possessed. When Emma struggled with homework, I could immediately adjust our evening routine to provide more support. When Jake had nightmares, I could comfort him without worrying about disrupting Sarah's sleep or contradicting her parenting theories. The school reports represented more than academic and social progress. They were evidence that choosing truth and stability over maintaining a broken marriage had been the right decision for everyone involved. Emma and Jake were thriving because they lived in a home where they could count on honesty, consistency, and unconditional love from their primary parent. As I filed Emma's report card in her memory box alongside Jake's preschool artwork, I realized that we'd not only survived the destruction of our original family structure, we'd built something stronger from the pieces. The three of us had become a complete family unit, bonded by shared experiences, mutual love, and the security that comes from knowing that the people you live with choose to be there every single day. For the first time since discovering Sarah's betrayal, I felt genuinely excited about our future, rather than simply relieved to have survived our past. The final divorce decree arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by certified mail in an envelope that contained the official end of my marriage and the legal foundation of my children's future. Judge Margaret Hendricks had rendered her decision after reviewing 6 months of evidence, testimony, and expert evaluations. As I opened the document, I felt a mixture of anticipation and closure that I'd been waiting for since the day I first saw those DNA test results. The decree was comprehensive, addressing every aspect of our former life together, with the clinical precision of legal language. But beneath the formal terminology lay a complete vindication of the choices I'd made to protect Emma and Jake from their mothers: instability and poor judgment, primary, physical and legal custody of minor children. Emma Rose Matthews and Jacob Daniel Matthews is awarded to Petitioner Daniel Matthews, the document began. Respondent Sarah Elizabeth Matthews is awarded supervised visitation on alternating Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., with supervision to be discontinued only upon successful completion of court-ordered mental health treatment and demonstration of stable housing and employment for a period of no less than 6 months. Felt a wave of relief that made my knees weak. Emma and Jake would stay with me. They wouldn't be shuffled between unstable households or forced to adjust to Marcus as a stepfather. Their primary home would remain the apartment where they'd found security and happiness over the past several months. The custody decision was particularly significant because the court had rejected Sarah's claims regarding Michael entirely. The court finds that DNA evidence conclusively establishes that minor child Michael James is not the biological offspring of petitioner Daniel Matthews. Petitioner has no legal obligation for support, custody, or visitation regarding said minor child. Respondent's request for child support for Michael James is denied. Judge Hendricks had been thorough in her reasoning, citing Sarah's deception about Michael's paternity as evidence of fundamentally compromised judgment regarding truthfulness and the welfare of minor children. The court had also noted Marcus's abandonment of both Sarah and Michael as evidence that Sarah's relationship choices posed potential risks to Emma and Jake's stability. The financial settlements were equally favorable. Because of Sarah's adultery and the marital misconduct involved in her deception about Michael's paternity, the court had awarded me the family home, my retirement accounts, and the majority of our shared assets. Sarah would receive minimal spousal support for 2 years, contingent on her completing mental health treatment and maintaining stable employment. The court recognizes that respondent's adultery and Deception regarding paternity constitute significant marital misconduct that affected the economic circumstances of both parties, the decree stated. Respondent's decision to spend marital assets supporting an extramarital relationship, combined with her voluntary termination of employment, demonstrate a pattern of financial irresponsibility that justifies unequal asset distribution. Perhaps most importantly, the court had addressed the question of future modifications to the custody arrangement. Any request by Sarah for increased visitation or shared custody would require her to demonstrate not only mental health stability, but also a sustained period of truthful communication with minor children and their father, stable housing appropriate for children, and employment sufficient to provide financial support without reliance on public assistance or support from romantic partners. The language was carefully crafted to prevent Sarah from using a new relationship to gain financial stability that might support a custody modification. The court was essentially requiring her to prove she could function as a stable, independent adult before being entrusted with increased responsibility for Emma and Jake's welfare. Patricia had attached a summary letter explaining the broader implications of the decree. This is one of the most favorable custody awards I've seen in cases involving adultery and deception, she wrote. Judge Hendricks clearly recognized the devastating impact of Sarah's choices on the children's stability and awarded custody accordingly. The provisions regarding future modifications are also unusually strict, providing excellent protection for your family's long-term security. The decree also addressed the question of Marcus's parental rights and responsibilities for Michael. Because he'd fled to Denver and was actively fighting paternity claims, the court had issued a bench warrant for his appearance to determine child support obligations. The court finds that Marcus William Peterson's flight from jurisdiction and refusal to submit to court-ordered paternity testing constitute contempt of court, the document stated. For Michael, this meant that his biological father would eventually be forced to provide financial support, even if he continued to refuse emotional involvement. The court was ensuring that Sarah wouldn't be left entirely without resources to care for the child Marcus had fathered and abandoned. Reading through the decree's detailed provisions, I was struck by how completely it validated every choice I'd made since discovering Sarah's betrayal. My decision to protect Emma and Jake from instability, my refusal to accept financial responsibility for another man's child, my insistence on truth and accountability, all of it had been recognized and supported by the court. The decree also included specific language about communication and decision-making. Petitioner Daniel Matthews shall have sole authority over major decisions regarding minor children's education, health care, religious upbringing, and extracurricular activities. Respondent may request input into such decisions, but final authority rests with petitioner. This provision meant I could continue making parenting decisions based on what was best for Emma and Jake without having to negotiate with someone whose judgment I no longer trusted. Most meaningfully, the court had recognized the importance of stability and consistency in children's lives. The evidence demonstrates that minor children have thrived under petitioner's care and have developed strong emotional bonds and sense of security in their current living situation. The court finds it in the children's best interest to maintain this stability while allowing for supervised contact with their mother as her circumstances permit. That evening, I sat Emma and Jake down to explain the court's decision in terms they could understand. The judge decided that you'll keep living here with me as your main home, I told them. You'll still see Mommy sometimes, but this apartment will always be your primary home where all your stuff is and where you sleep every night. Emma, now 7 and increasingly perceptive about adult situations, asked the question I'd been expecting. Does this mean you and Mommy are never getting back together? That's right, sweetheart. Mommy and I are officially divorced now, but that doesn't change how much we both love you and Jake. Jake, at 4, was more concerned with practical matters. Are we keeping our rooms painted the way we picked? Absolutely. This is your home for as long as you want it to be. As I tucked them into bed that night, I reflected on how the final divorce decree represented far more than the legal end of my marriage. It was official recognition that choosing truth over comfortable lies, stability over familiar dysfunction, and children's welfare over adult emotions had been the right path forward. The decree would go into our family documents alongside birth certificates, social security cards, and other papers that defined our legal existence. But unlike those routine documents, this one represented our emergence from crisis as a stronger, more authentic family unit. Judge Hendricks had given us the legal foundation to build whatever future we chose, free from the deception and instability that had characterized the final years of my marriage. Emma, Jake, and I could move forward, knowing that our family structure was not only emotionally healthy, but legally protected. The final divorce decree was both an ending and a beginning, the official close of one chapter of our lives, and the legal framework for whatever came next. The social media screenshots arrived in my email inbox on a Thursday evening, forwarded by my sister Kate with a message that simply read, "You need to see this." I opened the attachments with growing amazement as I scrolled through Facebook posts, neighborhood forum discussions, and local parenting group conversations that had turned my private family crisis into a cautionary tale about truth, accountability, and the consequences of betrayal. The story had apparently spread through our suburban community like wildfire, starting with Jennifer Peterson's very public divorce filing and expanding as neighbors, co-workers, and school parents connected the dots between Sarah's sudden absence, my single parenting, and the dramatic changes in both the Peterson and Matthews households. I always thought Sarah and Daniel had the perfect marriage, posted Lisa Chen from our neighborhood association. Seeing him at the school pickup every day now, taking care of those kids all by himself, you can tell he's doing an amazing job. It makes you wonder what really happened behind closed doors. The responses revealed how our community had been watching and drawing their own conclusions. "My daughter is in Emma's class," wrote Jennifer Walsh. "The teacher says Emma is thriving this year, more confident and happy than she's ever been. Sometimes divorce is the healthiest choice for everyone involved, especially the children." More revealing were the discussions about Sarah's situation. "I saw her at the grocery store last month," posted someone named Michelle Rodriguez. "She looked terrible. Exhausted, stressed, pushing a baby stroller and barely keeping it together. I wanted to say something supportive, but honestly I didn't know what to say after hearing about the whole situation with her boss." The neighborhood forum threads were particularly illuminating. "Does anyone know what happened with Marcus Peterson?" asked a user named Suburban Dad 23. "His house has been empty for months and his wife Jennifer is apparently going through a nasty divorce. There are rumors about an affair with an employee." The responses painted a picture of a community that had been paying attention to details I hadn't realized were visible. "I saw Sarah's car at Marcus's house multiple times over the past couple years," wrote one poster. "Always thought it was weird for employee meetings to happen at his personal residence on weekends. Most surprisingly, the community reaction was overwhelmingly supportive of my choices and critical of Sarah and Marcus's behavior. Daniel Matthews is raising those kids by himself and doing a fantastic job," posted someone from Emma's school parent group. "Whatever happened in their marriage, he's handling it with class and putting his children first. That's what real fathers do." The local parenting groups had apparently turned our situation into discussions about infidelity, co-parenting, and protecting children during divorce. "I know the family involved," wrote a user in the Single Parents of Riverside group. "The father has been attending our support meetings and is one of the most dedicated parents I've ever met. He's proof that sometimes the best thing you can do for your kids is remove them from toxic situations, even when it's painful." But the most unexpected consequence was how my story had apparently inspired other parents dealing with similar betrayals. "Reading about Daniel's situation gave me the courage to leave my own cheating husband," posted someone named Sarah M., not my Sarah, in a divorce support forum. "Seeing how well his children are doing shows that kids can thrive after divorce if they have one stable, honest parent who puts their welfare first." The support extended beyond social media. Neighbors who had been casual acquaintances were now stopping me at school pickup to offer help with childcare, invitations to family events, and words of encouragement. Mrs. Patterson from down the street had started bringing us dinner once a week, claiming she always made too much food anyway. "You're an inspiration to single fathers everywhere," she told me the previous week. "Those children are lucky to have a daddy who fought so hard to protect them." The professional consequences for Sarah and Marcus had been even more severe than I'd anticipated. Peterson and Associates had apparently conducted a thorough investigation following Marcus's resignation, leading to policy changes about workplace relationships and employee protection. Sarah's abrupt departure had left several major client accounts in chaos, and her replacement had discovered irregularities in expense reports that suggested she'd been using company funds to support her affair. "The whole firm is still dealing with the fallout," reported someone who claimed to work there. "They've hired consultants to review all their HR policies and are facing potential lawsuits from clients whose campaigns were mismanaged during the transition." Marcus's new position in Denver had apparently been short-lived. According to LinkedIn updates that Kate had been tracking, he'd left to pursue other opportunities after only 3 months. The professional reputation damage had followed him across state lines. making it difficult to establish credibility in a new market. Most significantly, his flight from paternity responsibilities had backfired spectacularly. Colorado's Child Support Enforcement Agency had coordinated with our state to garnish his wages directly, ensuring that Michael would receive financial support regardless of Marcus's willingness to be involved emotionally. His attempts to avoid responsibility had resulted in court-ordered payments significantly higher than what he might have negotiated through voluntary acknowledgement. Sarah's social isolation had become nearly complete. According to the social media discussions, she'd lost most of her friendships as the details of her deception became known. The women who had once considered her a role model for balancing career and family now saw her as a cautionary tale about the destruction that selfishness and dishonesty could cause. "I used to be so envious of Sarah's life," posted someone from her former book club. "Beautiful family, successful career, seemingly perfect marriage. Now I realize none of it was real." It makes you appreciate what you have when it's built on honesty instead of lies. The children at Emma and Jake's schools had apparently been shielded from most of the adult drama, but their teachers had noted the positive changes in both kids since our family structure had stabilized. "Emma talks about her daddy with such pride," her teacher had mentioned during our last parent conference. "She clearly feels secure and loved, which is what matters most." Perhaps the most unexpected consequence was how my experience had led to speaking opportunities. The local single-parent support group had asked me to share my story at their monthly meeting. A family law attorney had requested permission to use our case, with names changed, as an example in her presentations about protecting children during high conflict divorces. "Your story shows that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, ultimately leads to the best outcomes," Patricia Harper had told me. "You've become proof that fathers can and should fight for their children when the other parent's judgment is compromised." As I reviewed the social media screenshots and community discussions, I realized that what had felt like the most private, painful experience of my life had become a public testament to the importance of truth, accountability, and putting children's welfare above adult convenience. The unexpected consequence of Sarah's betrayal and my response to it was that Emma, Jake, and I had gained a community of supporters who understood that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior, even when that parent is their own spouse. Our story had become evidence that families can not only survive betrayal and divorce, but emerge stronger when they're rebuilt on foundations of honesty and genuine love. The Father's Day card was waiting on my nightstand when I woke up on Sunday morning, handmade with Emma's careful 7-year-old penmanship and Jake's enthusiastic 5-year-old artwork. The front featured a drawing of our apartment building with 3 stick figures holding hands in front of it. Emma, Jake, and me, with a bright yellow sun and the words "Best Daddy Ever" written in purple crayon. Inside, Emma had written, "Dear Daddy, thank you for taking care of us and making us feel safe every day. You are the best father in the whole world and we love you more than all the stars. Love, Emma and Jake." Below her message, Jake had added his own contribution, a handprint in blue paint with "I love you, Daddy," spelled out in his preschool letter recognition. 2 years had passed since the day I'd received that devastating DNA test result and learned that my wife had been living a double life. 2 years since I'd made the hardest decision of my life to protect my biological children from the chaos and instability that Sarah's choices had created. Looking at this Father's Day card, I knew with absolute certainty that every difficult moment had been worth it. Emma and Jake had not just survived our family's upheaval, they had flourished. Emma was now excelling in 2nd grade, had made the school honor roll both semesters, and had developed into a confident, articulate child who approached challenges with creativity and determination. Her artwork had evolved from simple stick figures to detailed drawings that told complex stories about friendship, adventure, and the security of home. Jake had grown into a thoughtful, funny kindergartner who made friends easily and approached the world with infectious enthusiasm. His speech had developed beautifully. His curiosity about everything from dinosaurs to space exploration kept me constantly learning, and his capacity for empathy and emotional intelligence amazed me daily. Our apartment had evolved into something far beyond temporary housing. It had become our permanent home, a space filled with laughter, learning, and the comfortable rhythms of a family that had learned to thrive together. Emma's room was a gallery of her artwork and achievements. Jake's room was headquarters for elaborate Lego constructions and stuffed animal adventures. The living room was our gathering place for movie nights, homework sessions, and the countless conversations that happen when children feel safe enough to share their thoughts and dreams. The supervised visitations with Sarah had gradually evolved into something more stable, though still carefully structured. After 18 months of consistent therapy and medication management, she had been allowed unsupervised visits every other Saturday afternoon. The children looked forward to seeing her, but they never questioned where their primary home was or who their primary parent would always be. Sarah herself seemed to be slowly rebuilding her life, though it bore no resemblance to the fantasy she'd once imagined with Marcus. She lived in a modest apartment across town, worked as a freelance marketing consultant, and was slowly paying off the legal debts from our divorce proceedings. Most importantly, she had begun to accept responsibility for her choices and their consequences. "I know I can never undo what I did to our family," she had told me during one of our brief conversations at a school event. "But I want Emma and Jake to know that I love them and that I'm working every day to become someone they can be proud of." Michael, now 2.5, remained a peripheral figure in our lives. Sarah brought him to some of the children's activities, and Emma and Jake interacted with him as they would any young child, with kindness and care, but without the deep sibling bond they shared with each other. He was growing into a beautiful toddler who looked exactly like Marcus, a constant reminder of the choices that had changed all our lives. Marcus himself had faded into complete irrelevance. His child support payments arrived automatically through wage garnishment, but he had made no effort to establish a relationship with Michael or acknowledge his existence beyond the legal requirement. He had remarried quickly after his divorce from Jennifer was finalized, apparently having learned nothing from the destruction his previous affair had caused. The most unexpected development had been my own journey toward healing and growth. Individual therapy had helped me process the betrayal and rebuild my sense of self-worth. I had learned to recognize the warning signs I'd missed in my marriage, developed better communication skills, and gained clarity about what I wanted in any future relationship. 6 months ago, I had begun dating Rebecca Chen, a fellow single parent I'd met through the school PTA. She was divorced with a 9-year-old daughter named Amy, and our relationship had developed slowly and carefully, with both of us prioritizing our children's adjustment and emotional security over romantic urgency. Emma and Jake adored Rebecca and had formed a genuine friendship with Amy. Our families had begun spending time together, hiking, visiting museums, sharing meals, creating the foundation for what might eventually become a blended family built on mutual respect, shared values, and honest communication. "You're not the same person you were when we first met," Dr. Torres had observed during our final therapy session. "You've learned to trust your instincts, set healthy boundaries, and put your children's welfare above social expectations or personal convenience. That transformation will serve you well whatever the future brings." The most profound change was in my relationship with Emma and Jake themselves. Without the need to navigate between different parenting styles or defer to a partner whose judgment I'd learned not to trust, I had developed a confidence and authenticity as a father that I'd never possessed during my marriage. "We're proud of you too, Daddy," Emma had told me recently when I'd shared news of a promotion at work. "You take such good care of us and you always tell us the truth. And you make us feel safe even when things are scary." That simple statement captured everything I'd hoped to achieve through the difficult choices of the past 2 years. My children felt safe, loved, and secure in the truth of our family structure. They knew they could count on their father to prioritize their welfare, to be honest with them, and to protect them from instability and chaos. As I sat in our kitchen on Father's Day morning, reading their handmade card while they prepared the breakfast in bed they insisted on making for me every year, I reflected on how completely our lives had been transformed. What had begun as the worst betrayal I could imagine had led to the most authentic, joy-filled family life I'd ever experienced. The DNA test that had shattered my world had actually freed us to become who we were meant to be, a family of 3 people who chose each other every day, who built our relationships on honesty and genuine love, who faced challenges together with courage and creativity. Emma and Jake would grow up knowing that their father had fought for them, protected them, and built their life on foundations that would never shift beneath their feet. They would understand that love means choosing someone's welfare over your own comfort, that family is defined by commitment rather than genetics, and that truth, however painful initially, always leads to better outcomes than comfortable lies. As Emma and Jake carried their carefully prepared breakfast tray into my room, singing an off-key but enthusiastic version of Happy Father's Day, I realized that I had never been happier or more grateful for the life we had built together. The Father's Day card would join the growing collection of artwork, school projects, and handwritten notes that documented our journey from crisis to joy. Each piece represented not just their love for me, but our shared commitment to the truth that had set us all free, that the best families are the ones that stay together, choose each other daily, and build their love on foundations that can weather any storm. We had found our beginning in what seemed like an ending, and our future stretched ahead of us bright with possibility, secured by bonds that no betrayal could break.